Increased intensity of the main powerful rank? Well, this morning began in Moscow with an attack by Ukrainian drones. Several hundred unmanned aerial vehicles attacked Moscow and the Moscow region, plus some other regions of Russia, and in Moscow itself, the oil refinery was attacked again. In general, this is the main topic. There is terrible damage, not to everything, of course, but nevertheless, the oil refinery has big problems and they won't be solved anytime soon. Let's take a look at what's happening there. So, this morning, Ukrainian drones attacked Moscow and the Moscow region, and the oil refinery in Kapotnya was hit. That's basically the main thing. And there are a lot of videos, even though it's forbidden to film and upload all this, people still record and post them. Here, smoke covers the entire horizon, so you could say that Moscow is shrouded in smoke. Moscow is, of course, huge, so I think it's not visible from every district, but still, there's some serious real damage here. And this isn't the only damage. Several drones hit residential buildings after the air defense system was activated, and of course there are certain consequences. Right here, but the main damage is to the oil refinery. Drone debris fell on the territory of the Sadovod shopping center. One of the buildings is damaged. This is the largest center, and there is also a fire there. And in total, according to Sobyanin, the mayor, air defense forces intercepted 137 drones as they were approaching the city. That is, the attacks are constantly intensifying and escalating. On top of that, the drones that are flying are unmanned aerial vehicles with artificial intelligence, at least according to statements from Ukrainian forces. Whether that's true or not, we can't verify it, but that's what they're saying. In Zhukovsky near Moscow, a drone crashed into an apartment building on Gagarin Street. The fire escape exit was damaged, and there are a few other damages as well. As for other outlets and sources, they also show us a picture and say that on the morning of June 18, drones damaged the Moscow oil refinery. And despite the fact that Moscow is now equipped with Pantsir systems, some drones still managed to get through. To be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable about air defense, but I'm sure it's hard to shoot down these small drones with large systems. Especially with missiles, since they're expensive and their supplies are probably not unlimited. Write in the comments how drones are best shot down. So, what are the ideal means of air defense, and are the Pantsir systems really capable of handling it? For example, what if there is a simultaneous attack of 200 drones on a specific city? And of course, the residents of Moscow and the Moscow region are naturally in shock because, well, this is the second attack of this kind and it's even bigger than the first one. There are videos, I'm not showing them, where people are asking what on earth is going on. Well, at 6 a.m., all of this was attacked at night. At 6 a.m., Sobyanin admitted that some of the drones managed to reach their targets. There are also videos of this damage. Here we have an oil refinery. So, well, the fire looks from the outside to me as a lay observer just monstrous with those kinds of flames. Maybe, of course, it's just a mosquito bite, as they say, but still, it all looks pretty creepy. With all this smoke covering the horizon with these flames, it's just insane. What are they saying here? The mayor of Moscow has reported drones being shot down multiple times, so this isn't the first or second attempt. At first he announced the destruction of 15 drones, then 6, 7 and so on, so they're coming in waves. As for the refinery itself, it wasn't the first time it was hit either. This is the second time it's been struck during large-scale attacks. It's located 15 kilometers from the Kremlin. And this is the largest refinery in the Russian capital, which supplies about 40% of Moscow's fuel market and about 70% of Moscow and the region's gasoline needs. And on June 11, Krasnodar Krai was also attacked along with the Afipsky oil refinery. A major fire broke out there after the strike. And today there were also several attacks on oil refineries in other regions, just in other regions, which also led to damage in various locations. Here in Ukraine, they are also announcing an imminent increase in attacks on Russia, in particular on Crimea. Defense Minister Fedorov states that Crimea will soon truly become an island instead of a peninsula, referring to its current blockade. I already made a video about this before. If I don't forget, there will be a link to it right here. It says that A, the logistical routes that lead from the mainland to the peninsula, well, the peninsula is also land, but you get it from the mainland. The peninsula is gradually being blocked off, and some roads have basically turned into roads of death, where drones dominate, where there are more and more of them all the time. And they are attacking more and more trucks, carrying various cargo, carrying military equipment, let's say military weapons, and other things. That's why Fedorov is continuing this, let's say, initiative now. And he states that Crimea is gradually turning into an island. In a new interview, Fedorov said that the dynamics of the fighting are changing from the isolation of the peninsula to new strikes on Russian logistics and artillery. He states that Crimea is being isolated by drones. And again, he repeats this statement about Crimea turning into an island. He also states that the harder Ukraine hits the logistics, the fewer assaults the Russians carry out. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine presumably has launched direct funding for units that actively use long-range drones. And this is called the Logistics Lockdown Initiative. There are also separate operations to destroy Russian equipment. For example, last year in just 3 nights, drones destroyed almost 800 units of Russian armored vehicles. This year, the focus is on artillery. They say that in 2 nights, 250 Russian artillery systems are destroyed. In addition, more drones are being purchased now than in the entire previous year, so the volume of these purchases is gradually increasing. And the main focus is on fiber optic and medium-range drones. 300 more have been purchased. About the quantities, well, you can judge for yourself. 150,000 medium-range drones and quadcopters have been purchased alone. 150,000, well, if about 300 drones were sent to Moscow, here 150,000 have been purchased. It's clear that most of them are used at the front. But nevertheless, a lot are now being sent to various regions of the Russian Federation. The situation at the front, says Fedorov, has changed. In May, Ukraine liberated 100 square meters more than Russia managed to capture. Well, actually, that's 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers. Moreover, there are difficulties there, so it's a rather questionable assessment, but that's what they're talking about. The rate of territory loss has dropped 3 to 5-fold. The Minister of Defense says the enemy now faces different costs to advance. If in October of last year there were 67 killed Russians per 1 square kilometer, now it's about 250. And then there's the part of the strategy that is comprehensive, according to the minister. It's the sky, the land, and the economy. And so what happens is what happens. But that's what concerns the front, what concerns Ukraine's internal actions and external ones in Russia. But we must not forget that Ukraine also has partners. Here, Monsieur Macron made a few statements with a stern look and a hawk-like gaze, looking somewhere into the distance, and he stated, together with Trump, by the way, that it is necessary to seek the return of the occupied territories to Ukraine. What's interesting is that Trump also made this statement. I don't know how accurate this is since the source is Ukrainian. You can write anything there, but still. The final declaration of the G7, the Group of Seven, has been approved, in which the leaders recognize the integrity of Ukrainian territory. But they always recognize the integrity at each meeting. But as soon as they meet, they immediately start recognizing the integrity and expressing deep concern. Well, I have another channel too. If you're tired of politics, welcome to the popular science channel called Americans on the Moon. Here you'll find popular science videos about lunar discoveries, climate, changes in solar activity, and even those very interstellar travelers. And there's another plus. We also fight against ignorance. There are all sorts of so-called molecular destructors, you know, all those astral projections and so on and so on. So join us, you'll find it interesting, Ukraine. That's a separate conversation. According to Macron, President Trump clearly stated the need to take a much tougher stance and that the territory should be returned to Ukraine. And Macron says he's right. According to him, such a common position means a real change compared to what has been happening in recent months. But it should be said that according to foreign sources, both European and American, they write that Europe has been uplifted because Trump gave his support. But we all know Trump. Today he says one thing, tomorrow he'll say something else. So I wouldn't put too much hope in the idea that he has changed anything or any point of view there. Nevertheless, it's true that he did call for a ceasefire. And by the way, there's a video where he was asked, "Mr. Trump, will you continue to support Ukraine?" He just smiled and changed the subject. So I wouldn't get my hopes up too much about this. Next, this is again about Trump and more details on what he thinks about the ceasefire. He made a statement after the G7 summit about the war in Ukraine, possible negotiations, and new pressure on Moscow. First of all, he said that his negotiations are going very well. Negotiations, both with Zelensky and with Putin. He said this at the final press conference. He stated the following: I think they both want to do something. They just don't know how to do it. And here again is a phrase in Trump's style, how he throws out those short, chopped sentences. They'll pay for it, we'll make America great, and so on and so forth. Well, here he says they all know perfectly well how to reach a ceasefire. It's just that neither side is willing to make any compromises. Zelensky refuses to withdraw troops from Donbass. And as a result, this is what we get. On top of that, Europe is also helping a lot, in quotes, of course, to make peace. So again, not a memorandum, but a final statement was made with 5 points that directly contradict Russia's concept of peace. These are international forces in Ukraine, military observers you have to understand from NATO. These are reparations to Ukraine. This is freezing the front along the current front line, and so on and so forth. There are many things there that contradict this whole idea of peace. A journalist asked Trump, this is interesting, if he considers Putin more responsible for continuing the war. Trump refused to answer that. He stated that he is trying to achieve a settlement and that such a statement doesn't make things easier. And here, by the way, yes, this is where the diplomatic aspect comes into play. Because when they ask something to Zelensky or those European leaders, their statements are such that basically there's no sign of diplomacy at all. Especially Kaja Kallas herself, who constantly expresses her personal point of view, mistaking it for the public position. Then the European countries say, what are you talking about? As a result, they are planning to dissolve this European Union diplomatic service, which is headed by Kaja Kallas. Because Kaja Kallas talks too much about things that don't exist in reality or about what she wants to see. And then all sorts of press secretaries have to make excuses. Well, and there's also a picture where everyone is having fun in this paradise garden. Honestly, I don't know who the photographer is, but he really deserves a medal. This is just crazy here. Yes, but here they're already telling us that Ukraine is Europe. Real negotiations with the EU have begun. There's excitement everywhere, joy in Ukrainian sources. But it should be noted that even Poland negotiated for 7 years to join the European Union. 7 years for Poland, which is much stronger, at least now, both economically and militarily. And that was a technical cluster. And Ukraine was assigned 8 clusters. That's just crazy. And naturally, discussing each of them will take many years. And that's also another powerful economic and military country. So, well, they say that here we're not starting from scratch. It's Kachka, that guy, Taras Kachka. Well, that's how it is. The rocking is getting wider. Oh, I didn't show you, did I? It's getting wider and wider. Wider. They say the deeper into the forest, the more partisans there are. And he states that there was no pause in the process of Ukraine's Europeanization. During this time, Ukraine underwent a screening of its legislation. Specifically, a thorough review of Ukrainian regulations for EU compliance was conducted, and the European Commission provided a list of required next steps. This conference, says Kachka, moves us into the practical final stage of negotiations on joining the European Union. He stated all this and then was pleased with the outcome. There's an interesting question regarding corruption here. It's no secret that corruption in Ukraine is so severe that, well, words can't describe it. Kachka stated that we can follow the scandals, we can follow the details of each specific criminal case. But what we see now is very systematic daily operational work by the anti-corruption system. Well, the villas are still there, everything is being built, everything is great, so I don't know what kind of daily work he's talking about with these anti-corruption bodies. The only systematic work that's visible is the siphoning off budget funds, and it's hard to say that's a good thing. He also claims that in Ukraine there is a very fast and radical change in political culture happening. The current parliament, which is passing the law, is now itself experiencing the consequences of these changes. In reality, investment is Ukraine's best anti-corruption measure for the future. Well, and the same Fedorov, the Minister of Defense I mentioned earlier, stated that if someone, God forbid, does something corrupt there, they will be immediately imprisoned and that's it. Well, it's interesting, of course, all those statements, but how much do they actually correspond to reality? We'll see. So far, during the anti-corruption investigations, they're just doing something for show, and that's it. But also, look, they arrested Yermak, then released him. They arrested another guy, then released him too. Do you need bail set at 130 million hryvnias? Yeah, now we'll collect a little from everyone to set Yermak free. There you go, that's how it is. So I wouldn't get my hopes up too much here. Well, and finally, probably in our video today, it's the tightening of entry rules. Rules for men entering the EU, men from Ukraine. Naturally, not just the average man in a vacuum. So, the European Commission is preparing a proposal to extend temporary protection for Ukrainians in the EU, but with possible restrictions for men of conscription age. It is reported that the European Commission proposes to extend protection even after 2027, but the scope of the mechanism is being narrowed so that reportedly Ukraine's ability to defend itself is not undermined. In other words, the manpower should stay in the country. The manpower, as all these deputies, both Ukrainian and European, claim, should protect Europe from encroachment by the Russian Federation, which apparently isn't making any moves toward Europe. But this kind of steel porcupine and steel quills, in this context, they mean Ukrainian men. How realistic all this will be is still unknown. After all, there are European laws that don't allow such things to be done. But the law now means whatever they want it to mean, as you know, so most likely they'll achieve what Zelensky is demanding from them. And Zelensky is making demands of Germany, of Nets, in particular of the Portagenos party, whose leader is already being called the Chancellor of Ukraine rather than Germany, and of some other countries as well. At first, Zelensky actually tried to negotiate so that men would simply be returned to Ukraine, just taken and deported, and that's it, deported. Ukrainian, so to speak, domestic legislation was being changed in this direction. Ukraine in general is itself democratic, no question about it, it just couldn't be more democratic. Well, and now what? Let's take a look at some powerful leaders. There are a lot of powerful leaders here, all of them want to speak to us, the TV is ready, the leaders are ready, and what? So who will speak first? Leninsky will invite them all. Well then, let's listen to the clowns. Go ahead, comrades. And now the most powerful leaders in the world are coming to tell us something. There's a guy here with shifty eyes, he's been on air more than once, and he just can't keep his gaze, can't focus his eyes on one spot. All the time his eyes are darting back and forth like that. Now he's saying that the war will end when every person joins the fight against the external enemy. The guy in the Hawaiian shirt with the darting eyes doesn't want to get involved himself, but he's talking about it in the studio.
We're still working with the resource.
Human resources. You're the resource in the Hawaiian shirt. Honestly, they really annoy me with these statements about resources, thinking there's something special and really important people, but the journalist seems to have fallen asleep.
Like a smart win, that's his for now.
The journalist is really sleeping? I'm curious, does anyone actually watch what the journalists are doing during this telethon? First, young Lenin is sleeping, now this guy is sleeping. Everyone's asleep, but these guys claim the money keeps coming in and everything's great. They sure have an interesting job.
And at this moment, both in the army and in society, for some reason people decided that this war could completely end without every sign. The war could completely end without every sign.
Go to the front and prove that the war will end. As soon as that guy and the journalists get to the front, I think the war will really end. But just sitting in a colorful shirt and making statements about biting into the enemy's body with your teeth, well, anyone can do that, anyone, young or old, but that doesn't change the essence. You can put different emojis on Facebook, smileys with a white handkerchief or with some kind of tank, but that's not called war either, man. It's when you go to the front with a rifle in your hands, that's what it means to join the front. But to talk live on air about how we should keep the war going for another 10 years, that's not it.
That's a clever perspective, but it won't be that way. Just wait a bit, and there will be some kind of peace deal or plan.
Meanwhile, he's sitting behind some strange screen, probably in a kitchen, and behind the screen his wife is making dumplings, which he's about to fight with. And the tough fighter declares that we need to fight right now for the interests of Monofrint, hooray for Sanic. On the other hand,
the work will be done for me. Unfortunately, there is such a problem in society, in the community, and that is the result will depend on how we fight, how we mobilize our resources.
So right now, your so-called resources are real people who are actually on the front lines fighting for you. It's your resources that are just sitting around and talking. People are sitting on the front lines, dying, getting injured, suffering serious damage to their health, and you're just sitting and talking about resources, calling people that and putting them down. Yes, let's honestly call the journalist what he is again. What can you do? Well, he won't let me have a proper conversation. He just keeps sleeping and sleeping. Well, fine, the soldier sleeps, but the service goes on. Well, that's the kind of fighters we have. I can imagine what they'd be like on the front lines. If they can't handle it in the studio, what will they do out there? So then we have here the Flying Valkyrie, a real one. She tells us how she sat down and then took off. There was already one like that before. She's also riding a drone. You know, like in Borzov's song, I think it was him and Nake riding a star. But this one is riding a drone.
Vashkina's artillery. The commander says, go on, try flying the vampire.
Fly the vampire. Try out the vampire. Oh, did you see that vampire? Let me show you the manicure again. How do you like this Valkyrie's beautiful maneuver? What can you fly? And the most interesting thing is that the maneuver is camouflaged. Well, apparently so the enemy doesn't notice Zinochka peeking out from the bushes with a drone remote. This is turning into something just...
I tried it that day and switched to vampire. Vampire immediately. Love at first sight. I wore it. Her.
Kochania, girl, well, there's love too, but when they talk about first sight, especially at first glance, that's kochania at first sight. Let's learn classic Ukrainian if you're already speaking the language of weapons. Kochania at first sight, not love at first sight. What is that even? Well...
On the sides, they twisted everything, made me wear an apron and go there. It's my first time.
To the front line. Can you picture this woman with keratin straight hair? These straight hair are probably from keratin straightening, which costs quite a bit. And well, to get it done, it takes more than an hour. Where does she get it done? Honestly, I don't know. And this miracle with a manicure with hyaluronic or whatever it's called, Galaru anyway, never mind. With her lips and everything, she's being pushed to the very front of the restaurant, I guess.
I was an ID engineer, a generator, and then we all ended up in a heap again.
And for a manicure...
5 метрів чи 10 він розоб'ється. Надо було максимально низько опуститися.
Oh Lord, this Surzik just exhausts me when I listen to them. Where did you all even study? Where did you learn to speak? For heaven's sake, either speak one language or the other. What kind of life is this, really? You just need to be mindful of the language's culture, I understand. Soldiers at the front speak however they want. No one corrects them there. But when these talking heads appear as spokespeople and share ideas, you still need to teach them proper public speaking.
Before, I used to sit for about 25 days, give or take, something like that. Where did you sit in the hair salon?
It's a kind of service. Apparently there's some kind of front, a barbershop front where they all sit. So you spent 25 days sitting there in the hair salon, then in the nail salon, then you fought over some pastries, and that's it. You're a veteran, you get an increased pension. What happens next is unclear. That's it. Goodbye, everyone.
Russia is ready for a new mobilization. What risks does this mobilization pose for Putin? What outcome is he expecting? How combat ready will these reinforcements be? And how will Russians react to this new mobilization?
Well, how will Russians perceive it? Well, basically, we've already seen this. In the fall of 2022, when there was a limited mobilization, 1 million people fled Russia very, very, very quickly. Yes, that's what it is. So we've seen this.
There won't be a protest, there will be an escape.